And welcome to our millions of viewers here in Nigeria, the continent, and all around the world. This is Lunchtime Politics, where we unpack the biggest stories in the political landscape this hour. Here's what is on our radar. With record oil and gas production levels, NNPCL's Group CEO Bayo Ojulari says the company is making good progress. Last on the program, Senator Adams Oshomole says former President Goodluck Jonathan stands no chance at the 2027 presidential election. Lunchtime Politics starts right now. And wherever you're watching from around the world, we are live from our headquarters here in Lagos, Nigeria. I am Kelly Egiga. This hour, we get to unpack security in Niger states where some youths are threatening the federal government to take legal actions against the government at the center. But we'll tell you all about it and get some perspectives in just a moment. But this hour, let's tell you that the Group Chief Executive Officer of the Nigerian National Petroleum Company Limited, Bayo Ojulari, says the company is making good progress with record oil and gas production levels being recorded. He was speaking after meeting with President Bola Tinubu here in Lagos, where he says he briefed the president on several issues, including attracting investment to the sector. The NNPCL boss also touched on the negative impacts of the face-off between Dangote Refinery and Pengosin, and the recent increase in the price of gas.
Recorded about 1.68 million barrels per day of oil production last month, which was very good. That was the first in about 5 years in terms of milestones. We also recorded the highest gas production at about above 7 BCF per day again, which is also the highest in recent times. But what we're also expecting is that with some of the turnaround maintenances that we've done in the month of August and September, all of those are meant to come back this month. And we are hoping that before the end of the year, we should at least be clocking at least 1.8 million barrels per day, all things being equal. I think it was quite unfortunate that the Dangote and Pengosin issue led to the strike. And as you know, whenever there's strike and critical staff manning critical facilities are not available, it's almost impossible. In this particular case, we actually lost significant production of almost over 200,000 barrels per day of production that was deferred. We also have gas production that was deferred, and power generation also was impacted. About 1.2 megawatts of power was affected by that strike. But I think I'm very pleased that the federal government, through the leadership of the Federal Minister for Labor and also full support from the National Security Advisor, we're able to pull together everyone into a dialogue and bring everybody to the table. And now there's been a communique that has been agreed on the way forward. We're all very hopeful that everyone will abide by those communiques.
The Group CEO of the NNPCL there, Mr. Bayo Ojulari, speaking there after meeting with President Bola Tinubu. Well, other stories now. As part of efforts to guarantee free, fair and credible elections in 2027, a civil society organization, the New Direction for Nigeria movement, is calling for a review of the law empowering the president to appoint the chairman of the Independent National Electoral Commission, INEC. The group was speaking at a news conference in Abuja. The group's convener, Comrade Mark Adebayo, is also urging state houses of assembly to prevent governors from appointing chairmen of state independent electoral commissions. He stresses that such reforms are necessary to ensure transparent and credible electoral processes across the country.
Ladies and gentlemen, our vision shall not run. We are tired of an INEC that undermines our elections. Nigerians are fed up with an electoral management body that suffocates the democratic space by denying Nigerians the right to association via registry of political parties without giving spurious excuses for disqualifying applicants. Nigerians have a right to organize themselves into political parties, and INEC has a constitutional duty to register them as such. We are fed up with an INEC that refuses to live up to its status of an independent body. At this juncture, and with the benefits of hindsight, it is no longer tenable for a president contesting an election and whose party is participating in an election to have the authority to appoint the umpire of that same election. How do you allow a team participating in a match to pick the referee? That match is already rigged against the other team. It leaves too much room for rigging and a credible challenge of trust. It is time for the country to implement the Justice Ways electoral reform recommendations in order to save our country and our democracy.
So will Mr. President oblige, will the governors of other states as well oblige that they cannot pick the chairman of INEC at the various levels at the states and of course at the federal level? Because Professor Yakubu Mahmoud, I should say, his tenure is rounding off in a couple of weeks now, and Nigeria is due for a new INEC president. And then, of course, there's a countdown to 2027. But before 2027, we have off-cycle elections in Anambra State, and of course, next year in Ekiti and Ondo states. But let's quickly tell you this hour as well that the senator representing Edo North, Adams Oshomole, has blamed former Nigerian leaders over their inability to end insecurity and particularly the uncurbed attacks by insurgents groups. He was reacting to comments by the former president, Goodluck Jonathan, at the book launch of the former Chief of Defense Staff, General Lucky Rabo. Senator Adams Oshomole also says the former Nigerian president will be defeated at the 2027 presidential elections if he decides to contest. He was speaking on our political program, Sunday Politics.
Now, how can Jonathan be a threat? We defeated him before when PDP was truly PDP.
But he's having a swelling support now. He's having a lot of swelling support.
Let's divide the word of support. Everybody has support. You don't have support. All it takes for me to do 3-face card for you and get 1 or 2 people to speak. If a man had a PDP at his best, at his peak, and he was defeated, I think only his enemy will push him to go into the race. There are other issues that may not be helpful to him. I think he has managed to demonstrate that out of power, you can be relevant and be at peace. If I were able to advise him, I will say, sir, maintain this status. You've governed for 8 years. You don't have to govern for 9 years. Right? Out of 215 million Nigerians. And looking at how he ascended to that office. If I were him, I would spend the rest of my life trying to find relevance, which he has already found, and speaking, because that conceded defeat. And that is memorable quote about my blood. Sorry, the blood of Nigeria is not what's also, but we will defeat him if he comes out. Flatly. South are no longer PDP. So where is he going to start from? If leaders, former commanders, a chief of the armed forces, have had opportunity to interact with Boko Haram leaders, why are we searching for them? Which means they know them. What did they do with the information? Did they need to wait for, in my opinion, for a book to be published by a former chief of defense staff? I also witnessed, listened to President Jonathan when he said that he found that the Boko Haram people were more armed, were better armed than the Nigerian army. I'm like, really? What should be the policy response to that? If as a president I found that the enemy is better armed, am I forbidden from acquiring even more sophisticated weapon for the Nigerian armed forces to deal with the ragtag army? My own philosophy is that the leaders should join in lamentation, because those who are hit look up to leaders for solution. When leaders then take turn to lament, I don't know what they want the followers to do. I think as a former commanders-in-chief, they've got to be very careful about what they say. Our leaders know these people, the leaders of these people, and they even engage them in conversation. And then we are looking for them.
Well, Senator representing Edo North, Senator Adams Oshomole, speaking on the state of the nation as well as, as they count down to 2027 builds momentum. Let's get to talk now, but just before we get into that, let's tell you that the coalition of Niger North Youth Forum has threatened legal action against the federal government over its failure to end insecurity in the state. Speaking during a press briefing held in Minna, the Niger state capital, the group's national president, Sahabi Mahmouda, called on the National Security Advisor, the Minister of Defense, Chief of Defense Staff, and all service chiefs to take immediate and decisive actions to restore peace and security in the region. Mr. Mahmouda also notes that the people of Niger North, comprising Kontagora and Borogu Emirates with 8 local government areas, have endured years of banditry, killings, kidnappings, and cattle rustlings, despite several appeals and interventions by traditional and political leaders. All right, let's get some analysis this hour now. We are joined by a legal practitioner, Mr. Kayode Akinshola. He's the Dean, Faculty of Law at Chrisland University, joins us virtually now from Abeokuta. Thank you indeed, Barrister, for agreeing to talk to us. So this group is threatening legal actions against the federal government. But just before we get into the legal aspect of this conversation, allow me to take you up on the speech made by President Bola Tinubu just 6 days ago when Nigeria turned 65. The president says that we are winning the war against terrorism, banditry, and other violent crimes. Are you buying into the speech of Mr. President, or I wonder if you think perhaps there is a disconnect from the reality on the ground?
Thank you so much for having me. I think I will agree with Mr. President to an extent, but we have to understand the peculiarity of Niger State. We've been having issues of insecurity in that state well over 5 years now, even before Mr. President gets into the office. And saying that we are winning the war, I wouldn't want to agree in total with Mr. President. The peculiarity of Niger State is to the fact that 10% of the entire landmass of Nigeria actually belongs to that Niger State, with about 80,000 kilometers of their landmass, and with a population of about 25 million of them. There has been several challenges, in fact, security challenges in that area. And the reason is not far-fetched. We have several states that are actually bound, the boundaries of that state. They tend to be very, very prone. We've been having issues of insecurity regarding to the elders, regarding to the communal clashes, corruption. But the challenge that that state is currently having at the moment is that they don't have camps. Some of these elders, some of these people constituting this banditry, they don't have a camp. They don't have a base. So they find it very, very difficult for them to be able to tackle it well. So to an extent, I will say Mr. President can be winning wars in majority part of Nigeria, but not in total when you talk about Niger State. Niger State, as it were, they are not really finding it very, easy. When you go, we go back to the memory lane, you will see instances where Niger State has actually been bombarded. If you go back to the year 2021, 2022, 2023, 2024, till we get to this year, we've been having recurrent instances of insecurity. And if you ask me today, Niger State happens to be the only state that has been consistent. I think you only liken it to that of Borno. But Borno State, they have their own peculiarity because they are closer to the Niger as a country. But unlike Niger State that is bounded by some states, like Sokoto, for example, Kaduna, Zamfara, and some Kebbi, when you look at some of this, you are bound to have that kind of a thing in that state. And I'm very sure that the governor, I expect that he should liaise with the Mr. President for them to have a very peaceful, it's not everything that's going to be legal this time around. I saw those youths mentioning that they want to institute action against
Barrister Kayode, that's where my next question is going to come from, because I'm just wondering perhaps what the options or the legal options are indeed for the group, the Coalition of Niger North Youth Forum. They have cited the Constitution precisely saying that the federal government has failed in her constitutional responsibilities. So I wonder perhaps what you think the options are indeed for the group challenging the central government in court.
You know, we have something we call non-justiciability of some roles of federal government or state government at its work. There are things that you cannot take government to court over. For example, if they are not performing well in office, for example, they were supposed to put in some infrastructure, they are unable to do it. Section 6, subsection 6B and C of the Constitution of the Federal Republic of Nigeria actually laid that to rest, that you cannot take a government to court over insecurity. You can't say that because they did not construct the road very well, they are supposed to give you a total security and they are unable to do it, and you begin to threaten them with legal action. It's not something that's going to see the light of the day. But within the ambit of law, within the precinct of the right of those youth, as well as the NBA that we have in Niger State, they have the power to come up with a well-organized protest. Because you cannot say we have a nation. The primary essence of government is to ensure that life is peaceful, life is livable, and life is enjoyable by the commoner and the less privileged in the society. They could go ahead and do protests, they could issue several statements, but for them, thinking that considering law option or going to court against the government, such a thing is not something that I think they will be able to actually have their way, in my own opinion, as a legal practitioner.
So it looks like this case is dead on arrival, Barrister. So Nigerians will be wondering, when you say the court is the last hope of the common man, so we see how protests in very recent times have been handled in this part of the world. But now that the federal government has been given a 1-week ultimatum, so I wonder, would you expect the federal government to in any way respond to this? Because I totally agree with you in terms of how insecurity has played out in Niger State for quite some time now. I did my NYC in Niger State, Mina precisely, so I have a clue. I was doing my NYC in that state where we had some sort of bomb blast some time ago, I think in 2014 or thereabouts. So for a while, that state has also witnessed some level of insecurity for quite some time now. Geographically as well, you have painted a picture for us that it's the largest state in Nigeria geographically. So this perhaps begs the question of, is there some sort of porousness and how the borders are being handled there? But from the standpoint of the federal government, I know the president has said that, look, we are winning the war. There's some level of progress. But now that they have a 1-week deadline to respond to this group. So I wonder perhaps if you think the federal government should respond to this group, and then of course I also want to ask you on the issue of state policing, which is also a major back and forth. Sometimes I feel like our politicians have a way of playing politics with these issues. They're in a back and forth as to whether or not we should embrace state policing. So do you think this perhaps is a time for the government to embrace the concept of state policing? Will it put an end to these issues around insecurity, especially in the northern parts of the country?
Thanks so much. Before I go to that answer for the state policing, I would first like to mention that our government, when it comes to the engagement of the electorate, they've not really been faring well. If we vote a senator or House of Reps member, the last day that you see them is on the day they're actually going to be inaugurated. They tend not to engage the youth. They tend not to engage their people. So there is a wider gap when it comes to the information and how best they could tackle some of their problems. And for crying out loud, I think the government, they are not really doing well when it comes to the public engagement and for them to really know the problems and the needs of people. The situation we have in Niger State is particular to Niger State. And I'm very sure that Mr. President, together with the governor in that state, should be able to sit down fashion out a way, engage the youth, tell the members of the electorate in that particular state that these are what we will do. And not for them waiting to a situation where they begin protest and begin to have unrest ahead of 2027 election. Don't forget that politicians will come after those challenges for them to win that, we'll solve this problem for you. You begin to see them here and there, promising heaven and earth. And the politicians, they are actually making use of this to cause, chaos in some states. Hence, we tend to have situations where people begin to say, we have insecurity, or if you vote for me, I will do it. It goes beyond that. I do not doubt any capacity and capability of Mr. President Bola Ahmed Tinubu to solve the problem that the people of the Niger State are having. As it stands now, I'm very sure, I have no iota of doubt, that if there is a serious engagement, their insecurity problem can be solved. And because those people, they are not powerful than our security apparatus and architecture, I'm very, very sure that if Mr. President will do the needful, I'm sure that we will solve that problem. Back to your question, talking about state policing. My own position has always been the same from time immemorial. I do not support state policing. And the reason for that is manner in which our governors over the years, they have made use of local governments, they have retarded them. Hardly will you see any state in Nigeria where a sitting governor or their political party will lose a local government election in Nigeria. How much more if you now hand down the security architecture in real terms to the hand of those governors? It's going to be a tool in their hand to actually inflict on members of the opposition. So that is the reason why I believe that state policing to an extent will only do a little. Don't forget that he who pays the piper will dictate the tune. So the security architecture that you want to hand over to the state government or state governor, as it were, we really have to take a cursory look at it. It is my own opinion.
Yes,
some people can bring other arguments to say that state policing is just the only solution.
Yes, very compelling argument you have there, Barrister Akishola. For those, and I hate to hold brief for the federal government now, but perhaps their response would be that this coalition of Niger North Youth Forum, perhaps there is a political undertone to their demands, especially now that 2027 is around the corner. Do you subscribe to that argument?
I do not subscribe to that argument. There will be no, smoke without the fire. If the youths are complaining, check the history of Niger State. You can go online, Google Niger State and their insecurity. That is dated back to many years ago. It has been a reoccurrent decimal, which has actually been happening. Let's assume, without considering that it has a political undertone. What does it take for federal government and state government to solve their problem? If they're having insecurity in a state, and people are complaining, and some people are saying it's politically motivated, then so be it. I'm of the view that if they're having a common problem, it belongs on the government. It is their duty, it is their primary responsibility to solve insecurity. Our government should rise up and smell the coffee.
Yes.
So if anybody is now coming to say that they are being sponsored, I'm of the view that if they are being sponsored, then solve their problems.
All right. Brother Akishola, let's... Yes, so we have to touch on a few more issues before I let you go, because we're absolutely pressed for time. The National Assembly extended their vacation by 2 weeks, but they're due to resume tomorrow, October 7. I wonder, perhaps from the standpoints where you are, what you think would play out. Remember that there's the controversies around the resumption of Senator Natasha Akpotudua, who is, of course, has resumed. Tomorrow we'll get to see her at plenary. But the big question is, should she apologize or not?
As far as I'm concerned, I think the problem that Senator Natasha had initially, truth be told, is more political than legal. And I think I've shared this on this station a couple of times. What she is standing for is the truth. Everybody knows that. She's actually representing the good people of that Kogi we'll talk about an apology. I'm of the view that apology actually means that you have actually committed such offense or you have done something that is not right. So to an extent, he could apologize, but he has to know how well to otherwise they will continue frustrating her till the end of that period. And don't forget, she's not representing herself. She has to think what she can facilitate. I know there's going to be so many issues around this, but a problem more of a political than legal. I will want to actually advise, if it is possible, it could find around a political solution to it rather than coming to the open for them to begin to say you have to apologize in writing. There is a way politicians tend to solve their problems, if indeed they really want to solve it.
Yes, I mean, you said it's more political than being a legal issue, but remember that there are some issues in courts. There's some issues in courts. Remember, she dragged the Senate president to court and vice versa. She's made some heavy and weighty allegations of sexual harassment against the Senate president. Both of them are in court. In fact, the wife of the Senate president has also taken her to court as well. So, I know that we have to go now, but so when you look at all that has played out now, you believe that perhaps these issues should be settled out of court?
I'm sure it will be settled out of court. If Natasha should stay in court, you can be in that court in the next 4 years. And it's not going to be, to our benefit. Don't forget, everybody knows in Nigeria that she cried out, she spoke up, you understand, and she was definite and resolute about her belief and what the Senate president has actually done and those advances. To an extent, there can be a political solutions around it. But I'm sure Nigerians, we know what is actually happening in that anno chamber. And to an extent, one day we will write our stories, either positively or negatively. But I'm sure that Mr. Senate President will never forget Natasha in the history of that this particular ongoing the Senate House. This I'm very sure.
It's a fine place to anchor a conversation with you, Barrister Kayode Akinshola. And it's interesting that you're saying that this takes a rather political dimension than a legal dimension. Perhaps it talks to just how the courts have failed Nigerians in many ways. But I must thank you indeed for your time and your insights. Indeed, Dean, Faculty of Law, Chrisland, Barrister Kayode Akinshola was joined us live now on the program from Abeokuta, the Ogun State capital.
Thank you for having me.
And that conversation does it for us here on Lunchtime Politics this hour. Thanks indeed for watching. On behalf of the production team and everyone here, I am Kelly Egiga, and you have been served on Lunchtime Politics. Bye now.